All right, I see we're recording. Well, welcome everyone to the fourth of our four sessions in this fall on nutrition with Dr. Deanna Minich. I'm Elaine Holland. I missed you last week, but as Deanna was saying in the warm-up, I ran the Seattle Marathon last Sunday and was not in any condition to be on a webinar afterwards. But it was a fun event, and we raised a lot of money for Harmony Hill, and that was the whole purpose. So. At the end of this evening's session, you will be getting a survey again, and let us know what you think of these sessions. We're looking next year, instead of doing one a week for 4 consecutive weeks, to spread them out a little bit, so it might be one every other month. And we'd love your feedback on what you think, whether you like them all squished together like this or if you want us to stretch them out some more. Before I turn over to Deanna, I will mention that the Survivorship Fair on August 24th, please put it in your calendars. It's also an open house. If you're, it's for everyone with cancer or people without cancer, so it's very much open. But our keynote speaker, Mark Nepo, is fantastic, and if you've not picked up his Book of Awakening, which we've listed there, we highly recommend it. With that, Deanna, I'll turn over to you, and we'll do about 20 minutes and then take 10 minutes of questions and then do another 20 and take questions afterwards again. So, okay. Deanna, we're delighted you can join us again tonight. So,
oh gosh, it's my honor. Thank you, Elaine. And as I was talking with Elaine about, we've got lots of information to cover tonight. And I would say out of all the webinars, this is the one where this is going to be the news to use. You can just implement everything I'm talking about instantly. So this is going to be a very practical webinar talking about how do you eat out, what kinds of foods do you shop for, and what about food preparation? So again, this is an educational-based webinar, and we're here to answer a lot of these questions. And if these points intrigue you, I would say definitely consult further with your healthcare professionals to figure out how all this information integrates with your specific treatment plan. Okay, so lots of different things here. We're going to talk, you know, it's so pertinent, actually, this information, because we're right about to enter the holiday season, and many would say that we've already entered it. So I'm going to have a little bit of a slant on the holidays and what you do as it relates to all those social gatherings you might be invited to. We'll talk about what foods to buy when you are out grocery shopping and some basic recipes. These are kind of I'm kind of opening the gate here to my own personal experience with food and a lot of my own recipes and my own tips and just what I had been through because working with patients and then working also with my own eating needs, I've really uncovered and discovered a lot over the past 2 decades. So I have a lot of information to share. Okay, so let's dive in. Talking about eating out, and many Americans are eating out, as you can imagine, in fact, more often than not. So I'm just going to dive right into the tips. One of the first ones is, especially if you have sodium-sensitive hypertension, to watch for salt. Pretty much when you're eating out, the things to look for are salt and sugar. A lot of foods are heavily salted or have had sugar added to it, and sometimes we get in the habit of just shaking the salt shaker over food before we've even tasted it. So you may want to be thinking about that. When it comes to dressings and sauces, always, I would say the default here is that dressings and sauces will have sugars in them. So when it comes to a salad, if you think of a salad bar can actually be unhealthy depending on which direction you take it. You know, if you're using a lot of like the creamed vegetables or the salads with a lot of mayo or sugar, and a lot of those prepared salads actually do have a lot of sugar. And then you've got the dressings. There might be sulfites on the salad. So, you know, sometimes we have in our minds that salads are the ultimate, but they can become very unhealthy depending on what we put on them. So when it comes to dressing, oil and vinegar is my kind of the true blue for me in terms of what works really well and what's reliable. If a dish comes with a sauce, what I would recommend here is to have the sauce come on the side, and then you can dip it, you can taste it to see if it tastes pretty sugary. And even sauces that don't taste sugary, chances are there is sugar in the sauce. So just to note that. And when it comes to ordering salad, iceberg lettuce won't give you too much in the way of nutrition. So you might want to skip, and usually you're given the choice of salad or a soup. And so what you can do instead of ordering one of those is maybe ask the server whether or not you can't just get more vegetables as part of the entree. That's also an alternative. And I just want to mention this. You know, many people get shy when they go into restaurants, and they feel very awkward about asking for modifications. I'm just the opposite. And what I have to tell you is that if you, you know, they're really there to serve you. And, you know, obviously you don't want to be too high maintenance and to, you know, be really belaboring every single detail of a meal because that just kind of slows the process down. It becomes kind of an inconvenience to the server. But, you know, if you see things on the menu that you'd like so that you know that the restaurant has them, feeling free and open enough to ask for those things. And you can always say that you have special dietary needs. So I'm really big on asking for what you really want at a restaurant, especially if you know that they have those ingredients. My rule of thumb, as you're going to see when we get into the ethnic eating, is to always avoid the things that come to your table before you even start officially having the appetizer or the entree. So in many cases it's bread or it's crackers or it's chips. And more often than not, if I'm with people that don't eat those foods, as a server's coming to the table, what I might say is, you know, you don't need to bring us those. You can just take those back. Because once they've come to your table with that and they've laid them down, they can't really reuse that. So it's just a waste of food for you, and it also becomes a temptation. If you are at, and we're going to go into this a little bit more, but in restaurants where they have rice, of course, choosing more of a higher fiber brown rice over white rice, which tends to be higher glycemic, would be preferred. And as I mentioned, don't be afraid to ask for omissions, additions, or modifications, especially for those of you who have sensitivities to certain food. In fact, you might already be used to asking for modifications because of that. So let's just take one in particular, like gluten. If you're sensitive to gluten, what you have to note when you go into Italian restaurants is that many times they'll tell you that you have a gluten-free dish, but yet they are cooking the gluten-free pasta in the same water that they cooked the glutinous pasta. So sometimes you just really have to ask those pointed questions, especially if you have allergies or sensitivities that are debilitating. And then evaluating serving size. This might be the obvious one, but what I'm noticing at many restaurants is that portions are just growing. And it's almost like the quality of food is declining while the portions are getting larger. So I have a patient who, this is his strategy, and I think it's genius. As the waitress comes to the table with the entree, what he does is he simply will look at it and determine whether or not he wants her just to take it back and then just serve him half. Or you can also look around and see what the portions are when you first come into a restaurant. Alternately, you can create, you can order the appetizer portion, or even you can ask for kind of the lunch portion of a standard dinner meal. Some restaurants will do that. So let's go into all the different types of restaurants that you might come in contact with. So Elaine just mentioned a Thai restaurant in Belfair that I had no idea was kind of a diamond in the rough. Sometimes the restaurants that don't look so good on the outside tend to put a lot of focus and might be more authentic with their foods. But some of the things that you want to note in a Thai restaurant is just note anything with a sauce, whether it's peanut sauce or dipping sauces, because these are going to be loaded with sugar. And again, what I'm doing here is I'm incorporating and weaving together everything that we talked about in the past 3 weeks and giving you in kind of this ready-made form a lot of the advice and how that would look. So we did in previous webinars talk about the role of sugar and cancer. So that's why when I'm mentioning things like sauces, I start mentioning things like sugar, really just, again, connecting to it. Also, lots of fried dishes, and when you think of Thai iced tea, lots of sugar and also lots of dairy, and it's not just milk, but half and half, so very high fat dairy. What I like to do at Thai restaurants is just to order simple tea, whether it's jasmine tea, black tea, green tea. In fact, when I was in Taiwan, and I know this is Taiwan and not Thailand, but it's very unique how they do this in Asia, but they serve different teas depending on the meal and what you might need to complement that meal with. So this Thai iced tea seems like more of an American invention, and the size of them are typically large. I already mentioned the peanut sauce, and if I go to a Thai restaurant, and I happen to frequent a particular Thai restaurant called Thai Hut in Gig Harbor, which I like very much actually, but I need to tailor those dishes, and many times what I'll do is I'll order one of the dishes and I'll say, hold the sauce, and all I want is the steamed vegetables with the cooked meat and a side of brown rice. Okay, so if you have a lot of sugar in a lot of these dishes, what tends to happen, this is kind of the Asian restaurant phenomenon where you're hungry about an hour after you've eaten. So that's because of the high glycemic sugar. So choose brown rice. I know at Thai Hut they do have brown rice, and I'm sure, Elaine, do they have brown rice at that restaurant in Belfair?
Yes, they do. I had to unmute myself. Yeah, and I see Gretchen's on the line. This is Gretchen introduced me to it. So Gretchen, this is the one that she referenced. So I'm going to remute.
Okay, thank you. All right, what about Italian? Now, Italian, I think, is probably one of the more challenging places because you're going to be bombarded with many opportunities for a lot of carbohydrates. So what you can, but in some of the more authentic Italian restaurants, what you tend to find is lean cuts of meat that have been grilled, or fish, especially if it's real authentic Italian, you find a lot of nice fish entrees. So what you can do is you can order the fish with vegetables. If you get a salad of some sort, again asking for oil and vinegar, and that is typically no problem in an Italian restaurant. In some Italian restaurants, and there's one in Gig Harbor called Il Lucano, there's Massimo's in Purdy, and both of those places now do have gluten-free pasta. So if you have a gluten sensitivity, I'm not so sure about if you have celiac disease and have a strong avoidance to gluten, and that's what you need to do, if that would be the best thing. But if you have a gluten sensitivity, these places could definitely make something for you. And then also just more vegetables. Whatever restaurant you go into, if you can ask for more vegetables, that can also offset a lot of the other items in the meal that may not be as healthful. So as I mentioned too, sticking with protein and vegetables rather than generous servings of pasta. And if you do choose to get pasta, because you can imagine that if you're going to an Italian restaurant, you probably do want some pasta or something that seems more Italian. Rather than getting a cream sauce, asking for pesto or marinara. What I have done is also asked for just olive oil and garlic. So chopped garlic and olive oil and some seasoning is also really delicious and very healthful. What about Indian food? Now this can be a challenge. What you're going to find in you might be surprised that I would say that, but a lot of the Indian foods that restaurants that you find here in the States have created Americanized versions of true Indian food. And I have I've been to Nepal and experienced this type of cuisine, and it is very different than you have here in the States. And what you find is a lot of cooking, a lot of overcooking, and a lot of dairy in just about everything. And many times they cook vegetables in dairy. So if you have a lactose intolerance or a dairy sensitivity or allergy, you need to note that. Now the good side of Indian food is that you're going to have more vegetarian options, but those aren't always so healthy either. There's another side to that, right? Because you might have samosas, which are fried vegetable fritters, which I wouldn't say would count as your daily serving of vegetables. There's more breading and more fried matter there than you actually do have vegetables. And, you know, you might be at a good, in fact, I was just told that in Bellevue there's a very, and I was told this by two East Indian people who are very particular about the Indian food that they eat, but they like this restaurant called the Spice Route in Bellevue. I have not yet checked it out, but that came with high recommendation from them. If you do order from the Indian restaurant menu, dal, D-A-L, or lentil soup is a nice choice. It's a low glycemic soup. And if you get to choose between different meat dishes, if you do eat meat, choosing something like a tandoori chicken, which is more of a grilled chicken, versus a creamed chicken or a korma dish would be more healthful in the way of avoiding a lot of the full-fat dairy. Now, I was just at an Indian restaurant on Bainbridge Island, and I love chai tea. I drink it all the time, but I make my own. And if I'm out, what I will do at an Indian restaurant is I will just simply ask them for the chai tea itself with no milk added. So, and that tastes very good. It's very spiced. Again, keep in mind it is a black tea, so it's going to have a little bit of caffeine. So if you're caffeine sensitive, you want to note that. But it is possible at Indian restaurants to get chai tea without the milk. Also, you might want to minimize the use of white rice. Usually at Indian restaurants, you get that heaping platter of white rice, which is just so easy to take seconds of. So if you can get more vegetables, and if I go to restaurants, what I typically ask for is more vegetables added to the stir fry or to the dish, and I often say that I'll pay extra for that. In many restaurants, we'll charge you about $1 extra just to add in some more vegetables, but it's worth it. Now, Mexican food, I think you can do healthy. First thing you do, though, is you tell the server not to bring chips to your table because right there, that's sugar, sugar, sugar. You have the chips. They're fried typically, they're oily, so if you can just not have them in your realm, I think that that's better. I think fajitas are some of the best things that you can do, and what you can also do at places like Qdoba or the other one, what is it, the other fast food, I'll think of it, I have it on the side, but essentially just do a naked bowl. Forget the tortillas or have them more as condiments and then focus on the meat and the vegetables. And again, if you're in California where they have more authentic Mexican restaurants, it's amazing all the vegetables that they put into the fajita blend. Carrots, you know, full carrots that have been sliced, and cauliflower, and I've seen broccoli. So, you know, there are ways to have healthy Mexican food. Many times they overcook the food and it's very oily, so you can also tell them to scale back on that. In a lot of, now there's a restaurant in Port Orchard called Blue Agave, and in fact also at even at Qdoba or the other one I'm thinking of, it'll come to me. Essentially making sure that you choose the whole versus the refried bean, so you're not getting the additional lard and the fat that will come with that. And what I do is I like a combination of the beans, the pinto and the black. Don't be afraid to ask for both so that you get some variety in the different phytochemicals from these legumes. And so if you do order fajitas, see if you can eat your meat and your vegetables first and add the tortillas as a side rather than a mainstay. Many people make the tortilla kind of the meat of the meal. And I think it's important as best as you can to choose a high-quality Mexican restaurant or takeout. So it is 6:20. Elaine, did you want to just take the time now to see if anybody has any questions?
Wow, that 20 minutes went fast. Yes, yeah, let's see.
I'm only on slide 11. Oh,
wow. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll unmute your line. While we're waiting to see if we have any questions, you mentioned you like chai tea, and I've been afraid of chai tea because the few times I've ordered it, it seems to come, even without dairy, it comes just loaded with sugar.
Okay, so there are different types of chai tea, right? So if you go to Starbucks and you ask for a chai latte, what they're going to give you is their mix, which comes out of a container. It's already pre-made, and that is loaded with sugar. The alternative at Starbucks and other places is a chai tea bag, and that's what you get at Indian restaurants, is just the black tea with the spices. So if you go to Starbucks, there's the Tazo chai tea bag, and many times what I'll do is I'll get that in steamed soy milk, or you can get it, I don't get it in any water. I just have the steamed milk, and I don't do dairy. So you can do dairy if you do dairy, and then just have them put a tea bag right in the steamed milk so that you don't get all the sugar. And actually it's a lot cheaper than buying a chai latte.
Great. Great. That's a great tip. Thank you. And I don't see any hands going up, so since you've got so many slides, maybe we should just press on.
Keep going. Okay, yep, I don't see any hands either. All righty. So Japanese, Chinese. Again, I think that these types of restaurants have the aura of being healthful, but there are a lot of pits here of where it's not so helpful. So watching for deep fried items like tempura, that's kind of the correlate for the samosas in the Indian restaurant. Fish, chicken, and steak with vegetables is preferred, and that's again if you eat meat, or even tofu. And what you're going to find is a lot of sauces in these restaurants, and teriyaki sauce. These teriyaki restaurants, those are, again, very deceiving. So typically what you get on the platter is white rice, and then you get this teriyaki glazed meat. Well, it's 2 times sugar, right? You've got the sugar from the white rice, and then you have this heavy glaze, which is full of sugar. So what you can do if you go to these places is just ask them not to have the teriyaki sauce if that's at all possible, and in some places it is. Trying edamame if you like soybeans. These are just soybeans in the shell, and it's a nice healthy option. Miso soup is typically fine as well. Now if you have a soy sensitivity, you don't want to do either of those 2 foods because they are soy. Watch for soy sauce if you're gluten-free. Why? Because if you read the label, the first ingredient is water, the second ingredient is wheat. So the soy ingredient isn't even until further down the list. So it definitely is a wheat-containing food. The best bet, if I go out to eat and there is, just various places in the neighborhood, but steamed vegetables again, and meat and or tofu. Now, sushi, I have no idea how this got the health aura that it did. Because if you actually look at the constituents of sushi, and Elaine, when you went to the Central Market, I'm sure you saw there in the refrigerator close to the produce section, they have boxed up sushi. If you start reading the label of sushi, what you're going to find is typically dyes, especially that seaweed salad, which is dyed. You're going to find a ton of sugar. And the ingredient list on sushi, just look at the pre-made sushi. It's incredible. It's very long. There are lots of constituents. And also, Karen had a quick question. She asked about Bragg's. Yes, Bragg's is better than soy sauce. Thank you. That's a really good idea. Bragg's aminos liquid is what Karen is referring to. This is a great soy sauce alternative. And also what else you can get here is tamari sauce, which is wheat-free. That is available. And in fact, you can ask at some of these restaurants if they have that. But I'm just not a fan of sushi. I think it's risky because of parasites, especially if you're going to a place that does not prepare them properly. And preservatives, how do you think that they're mitigating a lot of those parasites? It's with the use of preservatives. So in my mind, sushi is not a healthy food. Now, what if you don't have a choice and you've got to eat on the run? And your schedule, and I think that, wherever you are, you make the highest choice whenever possible. I've traveled a lot myself. I've worked with a lot of people that travel. I know that, you just have to look for, well, what can I have on the menu? And let's just imagine, goodness sake, that I even mentioned McDonald's here, but if, you have to eat at a place like a burger type of a place, having the meat without the bun and asking for additional lettuce or tomato would be a better option, right? And again, noting that a lot of salads, in fact, some time ago I saw the nutritional information for a fast food restaurant salad complete with the dressing, and it had pretty close to the amount of sugar that one of the desserts did. So you really want to watch the salads that they have in these different fast food places. All right, family gatherings, kind of transitioning now from eating out into eating socially, which can be a huge, really a challenge for many people, especially if you have a lot of food sensitivities. So some of the guiding principles here would be to use smaller plates if available. Sometimes you have a little appetizer plates that come around initially versus the larger plates. So portion size is where we typically tend to overdo portion amounts at things like family gatherings. So it's better just to take small tastes of things. If you can fill up your plate mostly with vegetables and eat slowly. In fact, if you're sitting around a table with a number of people at a dinner party, try to be the last person finished eating. And the reason why is because there have been consumer studies showing that people basically eat, and they just kind of sit there and they talk and they continue to eat until the last person is done eating. Now, this is not always the case, but it tends to be kind of a social rule that, you know, you don't get up until everybody's done, right? So if you're sitting there eating and then you finish while there's somebody that's eating very slowly, chances are you're going to go back for seconds. So start late if you can. Take small bites and chew very slowly. If you're going to a party with food, what I often advise patients on is don't arrive with an empty stomach. Have some type of a healthy shake or maybe a healthy bar or something that, you know, so it doesn't fill you up completely, but you've got something in your stomach, so you're not going to overdo it. So you might want nuts at a gathering, and also if you eat them slowly one at a time, that'll keep you more in the moment. And if you're standing by the table with your arm outstretched and within reach to a lot of the appetizers, chances are you might be overdoing it too with picking up a lot of different things and, you know, doing the hand to mouth while you're talking. If you're drinking alcohol, alcohol tends to reduce our inhibitions and induces overeating. So what you may want to do is start out, if you do drink alcohol. If you don't drink alcohol, then this doesn't apply, of course. But saving the alcohol for the meal rather than the socializing and the appetizers that happen before the main meal. And substituting with sparkling or plain water with a lemon or lime twist can be really fun. If you know you've got a social event like on Thanksgiving, or maybe you've got some holiday parties coming up at work or through your family, making sure that you exercise that day, I think, is a really good strategy as well. In fact, what they're finding in research is that a lot of the effects of exercise extend well beyond just that moment when we're exercising, or the 30 minutes or the 1 hour. So doing it before you go to a gathering, or even after, if that's the only possibility, is a really good choice. And it's not necessary to finish everything on your plate. Really being mindful as much as possible. And, you know, there's the clean your plate mentality, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And if you can, be mindful and remember what you're doing. You're celebrating, and you're really focusing as much as you can on the celebration and being with food and on the conversation, and looking at the conversation as nourishment more than kind of the nibbling and, you know, kind of the snacking throughout. Okay, so balancing it out, eating rich foods that you might see in combination with fruits and vegetables. And here's my way of going to gatherings. Typically what I'll do is, especially being from the Midwest where everybody does potlucks, I'm just always in the potluck mindset. And I do it as kind of a safeguard as well, because I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to eat anything there. So I bring a dish that I know for sure that I can eat, and I always default to that just in case there isn't anything that I feel is congruent with my eating needs. If you have an event at your house, at your space, you might want to ensure that everybody takes something when they go away. And that's just kind of a nice gesture, and it's also helping to relieve you of the burden of having too much food. We already talked about eating before you go to an event. And remember when we talked about the color principle with foods, making sure that you get a rainbow variety, not of artificial colors, but of natural colors. Watching alcohol, being assertive, and this is something that I see a lot of people caving into, is they feel obliged, or they really feel kind of in the spotlight to eat certain things at family gatherings, and it brings up a lot of old food issues for them. So at some point, just really speaking your mind about, what you eat, or just not even speaking it, but just kind of adhering to that as much as you can. In fact, what I have noticed when I go to gatherings is people become intrigued about how I eat, and then they start telling me about how they've struggled with certain things or how they're watching it, and it actually helps them to adhere to what they need to do if I open the gateway of eating in my unique way at a gathering. So it kind of gives other people permission. So don't feel bad. Bowls of fresh fruit can be great as substitutes for candy and chocolate. But if you are buying chocolate, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with chocolate per se, buy the highest cocoa content you can. So, there are 88%, 90% bars these days. Leftover meats, making salads instead of sandwiches. Okay, so what if you have a big social dinner? These can be challenging, right? And I already mentioned, try to be the last person to start eating. Pace yourself with the slowest eater at the table. And again, all this research is found in this wonderful book called Mindless Eating from Dr. Brian Wansink. I think this is an incredible book. And in fact, the most successful eaters at an event are those that will think about how much they will eat before they even start eating. So they actually, it's like a goal. You just imagine what you're going to eat, how much you're going to eat, and chances are you meet that goal. Now keep in mind that it takes up to 20 minutes for our body and our brain to feel satiated. So you at least want to take about 20 minutes. There have been some really neat studies showing that people eat for different durations in different places. So if you're eating at a fast food restaurant, the average amount of time spent eating is 11 minutes. If you're eating at a workplace cafeteria, it's a little bit longer, but not much. You might feel the pressure to get back to work, so 13 minutes. 28 minutes is how long people spend at a moderately priced restaurant. You might have the soothing music, and there's a whole process of food coming out to you, and that's actually more healthful. And when we're eating with 3 other people, we tend to eat about twice as long, which is interesting. And that can actually be a pro and a con, depending on how we eat and the company that we are having a meal with and what their eating behavior is like. So to kind of, I'm kind of summarizing here some of the global things that we just talked about. But again, when it comes to these holiday parties, putting yourself more than an arm's length from snack bowls, the studies do show that that is effective. Don't eat while talking with others. And in fact, that can be kind of your rule of thumb, to mindfully eat. And if you're talking with somebody, just focus on them and not the food. And then one other strategy, if you find it very challenging, is to arrive late to the party or even leave early. What about at restaurants? What if you're not at somebody's home? So we already talked about the bread basket for these holiday meals. Asking for water without ice. Now that might be an odd thing for me to say, but essentially when we're drinking lots of ice water before a meal, we may tend to feel cold, and we might feel more apt to eat more in order to have that sense of warming inside. You might want to split an entree or order 2 appetizers instead. And I mentioned too about looking around at other tables to see how large the servings are. If you order dessert, one of my favorite things to do is order 1 dessert for a big table, and always to share a dessert if you get a dessert, and to choose as best you can on the dessert, and kind of ask the waitress or the waitstaff how large the desserts are so that you can also get a gauge. And what I do for dessert sometimes is oftentimes at moderately priced restaurants, what they can do for you is give you mixed berries with mint, with kind of a mint leaf. And I have been known to do that repeatedly, where everybody else is kind of getting their dessert, and I'll just ask for mixed berries. And actually, it's very, very satisfying. Okay, what you can also do if you're having dinner at your house or you're going to somebody's house, If you are not having the food on the table, but you're pre-plating at least the high-calorie foods in the kitchen where people are then taking their plate to the table, where there actually has to be effort involved in getting the food, studies show that you will eat less. And I'll show you that study. It's really interesting. Smaller plates and taller glasses. These are visual illusions, but they actually work on our own psychology when it comes to eating. And in fact, even the tempo of music can determine how much we eat, believe it or not. So if you're at a restaurant where there's loud blaring music and it's kind of uncomfortable, chances are you won't spend much time eating there. So just the opposite applies too. If you're in a restaurant with classical music, you'll feel more soothed. You might actually eat for a longer time and you might eat more. So you have to keep a watch on that too. When it comes to things like buffets, it's kind of another paradox here. So buffets, many people like them because they feel like they're getting their money's worth. But with buffets, people tend to overeat because they want to get their money's worth. And they also want to try out multiple things on the buffet table. So variety is good, but it can also propagate more overeating. So when it comes to dessert, eating fruit, and if you can, when you eat out, as much as possible, especially if you have control over your plate at a gathering or at a buffet, filling half your plate with vegetables. Okay, so this is really interesting, and I think that there was a football game today, and I'm thinking of football season, but there was this study where essentially it was Super Bowl Sunday, and they put chicken wings, one plate of chicken wings in one room, all in the same space, but in one room, the plates were cleaned off as soon as they were done with the chicken wings. So there was kind of the clearing of the plates and refreshing of the chicken wings, whereas in the other room, they left the dirty chicken wings and the eaten chicken wings, and it just kind of looked very messy, right? Kind of, but in general, what they found was that the tables with the bones piled high ate 28% less than those whose tables had been bussed. Now, isn't that interesting? So also thinking about, do you want to hurry up and clear everything on the table, or do you want to actually, let some of that space be taken up by food that has already been ingested and just kind of the remains? There seems to be some psychological aspect of that. What about volume? And there is magic to air. If we can eyeball our food and kind of get a sense of how much we can eat, for the most part, what Dr. Barbara Rolls' work shows is that we basically know how much we need in order to satiate our hunger. And I believe I mentioned in another webinar about putting your two hands together, kind of cupping them, and that is the size of your stomach for the most part. That's a rough guide. So the studies indicate that we typically eat the same volume of food every day, even at the same meal. So what can you do with that information? Well, if you took a quarter-pound hamburger and you added lettuce, tomato, and onion, and compare that to a half-pound hamburger, basically a person eating both of those meals will say that they are full. It's just about the actual volume of food. And if you have lettuce, that's more fiber. Now, you can also take that hamburger and incorporate some fiber into it, right? You can put other vegetables into it to make it look the same size, but not necessarily having the same density of the burger. So as much as possible, incorporating air can actually offset some of the quantity of food that you're eating. So whipping more air into smoothies and into eggs. Another aspect that they found in studies is if we can't see our food before and during we're eating the time that we're eating it, chances are we'll eat more. So this is why you don't want to eat with a bag of chips, just putting your hand into the bag and then eating the chips that way. If you do choose to eat chips, putting them out, going through all of the motions, which can be laborious, right? But pouring them out into a bowl and eating them that way. Eating from smaller packages can also be good. The statistics show that people eat 20 to 25% more on average from larger packages. Now this is where I go into my rant about Costco and these large restaurant-sized packages that people bring home for smaller families. Chances are you're going to feel obligated to eat more, and the studies do show that. There have been various studies. There was one with M&Ms where some participants were given half a pound bag, and then other participants were given a 1 pound bag, right? And essentially what they found is that the people that were given the smaller bag ate an average of 71 M&Ms, and those that were given the larger bag ate an average of almost double, 137 M&Ms. So you're going to eat proportionally more. Same thing with spaghetti. If you give people a large package of pasta, sauce, and meat, all the making for an Italian meal, they will typically prepare 23% more than people given medium-sized packages. They do these studies all the time. These are consumer research studies where people don't exactly know what they're looking at or studying, but it's all psychological. So the size of the package makes a difference. And if you're like me, actually, this is kind of one thing I have to watch because I'm always looking for deals at grocery stores or stores. But any sign with a number promotion will lead us to buy 30 to 100% more than we normally would. You know, think about when you go to Amazon, right? And I always look at, well, free shipping if with $25 or more per order. Well, of course I'm going to try to think about how many books I can get to stack up to the 25 because I don't want to pay the $3 in shipping. But essentially they're getting me to spend more money. Same thing with food. Also think about where you're eating. If you're eating only in the kitchen, make a rule not to eat at your desk, and definitely don't keep holiday candies or treats at your desk. Make tempting foods as inconvenient as possible is the rule of thumb. 72%, this is quite a staggering number really. 72% of our calories come from food that we eat from bowls, plates, and glasses. So what does that mean? That means that your servingware typically determines how much you eat, which is why when I do nutritional consulting, I like to go to people's homes not just to look at their food, I like to look at what they're eating from. So these optical illusions, these visual illusions really do distort our intake. Here are some little, also some findings from this research. If you wrap your snacks in aluminum foil so you can't see the contents, typically you will eat less. Also, if you're buying snacks for an occasion that you're having at your house, a holiday gathering of some sort, buying snacks that you maybe are not particularly fond of, so you won't start eating them or, you know, have them afterwards to be eating. Chewing gum can help to distract you from wanting to snack. And I really like this. A colleague of mine, Dr. Kornberg, talks about how if you're going to have chocolate or a cookie, or you just know you're going to do it and just have that food, eat only at the table or on a plate. Make it a kind of a separate eating occasion. Many times what happens is people start eating this stuff on the run or in secret because they feel like, well, I really shouldn't be eating that. But if you make it so that people can see you and you're visible, chances are you're probably not going to overdo it. If you have your foods out of sight, that tends to be better. So, and I already spoke to never eating directly from a package. So, you know, there are optical illusions. You know, you can look at a vertical line and a horizontal line. They may deceivingly look very different, even though they're the same length. But if you look at how that applies to servingware, people drink 25 to 30% more from a glass that is short and wide versus a tall, skinny glass. Yes, it's true. You will drink more from a short, wide glass because you don't think you're getting a lot, whereas a tall, skinny glass plays tricks with your mind. This work, again, is talked about in Dr. Wansink's book. All right, so the clean your plate mentality. If we have our plate, many times this becomes a target from which we aim how much we eat. there was a very interesting experiment called the tomato soup experiment that Dr. Wansink talks about. Essentially, they had college students in a cafeteria, had them sit at the tables which already had preset bowls, and underneath those bowls were plastic tubing that connected to a big vat of tomato soup under the tables. But they couldn't see that because the tables were covered by checkered tablecloths, and they weren't able to see what was underneath. But essentially, they were coming into the cafeteria with tomato soup already in these bowls. They were to sit down and eat, and the instruction was, eat until you are no longer hungry. So eat until you're full or eat until you're no longer hungry. And what was really interesting is that the tomato soup would just refill automatically. And so they couldn't see that either because they couldn't see the tubing coming up into their bowl. But essentially they had to stop some people from eating, especially some of the athletes who just kept eating and weren't even mindful about how much they were eating. 81% of people in this experiment said, I'd stop eating when the bowl was empty. People were eating out of normal soup bowls, which are about 9 ounces, but there were a group of people that were kind of what they call the bottomless bowl eaters, where people would eat almost double that 9 ounces, and some others ate more than a quart. So this is, again, where we just kind of let the external environment determine how much we're eating. What's really interesting, if you do have a party, and in one room you put 12 bowls of food, and in another room you put 3 bowls of food, the people eating in the room with the 12 bowls will have 18% more food intake compared to the people that have just the 3 bowls of food. People like variety. They like to sample. So, and it's also more accessible if you think about it. So the rule of thumb here is if you see the food, you're probably going to eat it. The more hassle it is to eat, the less you're going to eat. And they've done a number of studies in animals and in humans. And what's really interesting is that when they had one study with unshelled versus shelled nuts, and people that were normal weight would basically, it didn't matter to them to have unshelled or shelled. They had 1 or 2 almonds as a snack. But people that were obese tended to eat only the unshelled nuts, not the shelled nuts, which is very, very interesting in terms of a behavioral habit there. When there was another study looking at chocolates and putting them on secretaries' desks, and they found that when the chocolates were in an opaque container, so meaning you can't see through it, versus a translucent or glass container, they actually ate more from when they could see the chocolate than when they couldn't see the chocolate. In another webinar, I talked about chopsticks. If you eat with chopsticks and you're not used to that, you'll tend to eat 20 to 30% slower. It just takes longer. So lots of good things here. You know, I mentioned about just your servingware, beware of leftovers, see if you can give them away. What would you have? So here's a suggested menu, some ideas. Leafy green salad with a low-fat dressing. Now beware of language on dressing like light, L-I-T-E. Usually that does denote more sugar. And again, back to the oil and vinegar. Vegetable soup instead of pasta. Vegetable platter with hummus or low-fat yogurt. Sweet potatoes and broccoli instead of mashed potatoes. Mashed cauliflower instead of potatoes. This is one of my favorites. Is to cook a head of cauliflower and then make it soft, blend it with coconut milk and olive oil and garlic, and it tastes very similar to mashed potatoes. Free-range turkey, lean cuts of meat, pumpkin sweet potato pie made with agave nectar and coconut milk. We talked a bit about cravings for sugar, and I'm just kind of conscious of the time here. Elaine, it's about 10 minutes till. Should I go for another 5 minutes and then we'll stop?
Yes, and everyone on the line, if you'd like to start thinking, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. But let's press on and get through some of this. This is great material, Deanna. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so cravings for sweets. One of the things that I have worked with patients on, and it really does work if you can stick to it, is every 7 to 10 days, basically you reset your taste buds. So if you can transition to fruit, even the higher glycemic fruit in the interim, instead of some of the sugars, that's going to be better. So look at your cooking methods, limit sugar as much as you can, and there are different books on the market. So there's a book called Deceptively Delicious by Jessica Seinfeld, and you know, these are pretty standard all-American recipes, but what's really unique is that this is all about how to get your kids eating good food. She will put into scrambled eggs cauliflower puree, and you'd never know it. Right, so that's just an interesting thing that she has some other things in the recipe that I wouldn't necessarily put in it. But again, she's pointing out something pretty creative here, that you can mask foods. In this book, she also talks about quesadillas with butternut squash. Listen to this one, chocolate cake with beets. Yes, you can disguise beets in chocolate cake. Brownies with carrots and spinach. Pancakes with sweet potato. I know Elaine likes sweet potato. Blueberry oatmeal bars with spinach. Spinach is actually very neutral, so it's easy to incorporate it into a shake and into other types of foods. Mac and cheese with butternut squash, puree, or cauliflower. Okay, so there was a lot there in terms of eating out and holiday eating. I'm going to breeze through the shopping. A lot of this will be intuitive, but I think that one rule of thumb is to eat before you shop. And if you have to, if you feel overwhelmed, use a list. My rule of thumb is I stick to the perimeter, right? I make sure that I'm around the perimeter because I don't want to get caught in the labyrinth of the processed food aisles. So when it comes to fruits, there are lots of different ones. And again, I think that these are great for warding off a lot of sugar cravings, even something like unsweetened apple butter. Or applesauce, a little bit of unsweetened applesauce with your meal. Vegetables, I would really encourage you to try out different vegetables, like one a week. We talked a lot about leafy greens in the previous 2 webinars. If there's some way for you just to try out, if you go to Central Market, try out one of those Asian leafy greens that you're just not familiar with and see how it tastes. Beans, we talked about beans as one of the top 10 foods, lots of different types. And just like if you go to an Indian restaurant, having the dal, making your own lentil soup can also be very, very easy. Nuts and seeds, things like almonds and almond butter. And one way to get more protein is just to take a dollop of almond butter and to mix it into your warm cereal. If you're an oatmeal lover and you want to get more protein, one way to do that is by taking some almond butter and mixing it in. You can also add into that some flaxseed meal and some nuts to get some protein. Really important to blunt a lot of the glycemic response of those carbohydrates by using protein. Oils, we talked a lot about oils actually, and we talked about olive oil, coconut oil. Flaxseed oil is one you don't want to cook with, but you can use that for dressings. There are a lot of non-gluten grains to try out. So buckwheat, even though wheat is in the name, this is a non-gluten grain, and there are some cereals that are starting to be made from buckwheat. And also soba noodles, S-O-B-A noodles, are made from buckwheat. For cereals and pasta, you know, cream of rice, puffed rice. Excuse me. Now, the only thing I don't like about a lot of rice, and usually when people go from not eating gluten into eating rice, then you get the high glycemic impact. So making sure that you add protein and fiber into the cereal is going to be important. And quinoa, remember we talked about quinoa, Q-U-I-N-O-A, making hot quinoa can be great for breakfast. There are a number of different types of breads out there. Mochi, M-O-C-H-I, is a pressed rice cake. And this is if you have a hankering for a pastry-like dessert. What you can do is you buy the mochi, and typically at a place like Central Market or Marlene's Market in Delhi, where they have more specialty items. You'll find it in the refrigerator section. And you can just make these puffed up little rice-flavored pastry-like things that don't have a lot of sugar in them. Animal protein, we definitely focused on that a lot, as well as different sweeteners, and stevia is one that we talked about as something that doesn't blunt, that does not change your blood sugar. A lot of these other sweeteners will have some degree of glycemic impact, the different ones that are on the market. Beverages and condiments, things like apple cider vinegar are nice to have for dressings, and also just as a healthful liquid that you can add a little bit into water to drink it in order to help with just acid-alkaline balance in the body. We also talked a little bit about...
I'm not sure. We've got a couple questions. How many more slides are we going? Do you have here, Deanna?
I was just going to finish up the shopping list, and then
okay. Great.
Yeah. The herbs, spices, and extracts, there are a number of those, and we did speak to those. I do have here a list of other favorites as well. For those of you who can't see the screen, things like Food for Life gluten-free English muffins, Udi's gluten-free products, but watch for sugar content in a lot of those gluten-free products. The So Delicious unsweetened coconut milk is one of my favorites. Zevia drinks, if you can't do soft drinks or would prefer to start weaning off of them. And there's even, the one that I get the most question about is, what about a cheese substitute? And there's a new dairy substitute on the market, a brand called Daiya, D-A-I-Y-A. And you can imagine it's not going to taste exactly like cheese, but it's pretty good as a melted cheese substitute. Just to tell you just very briefly, you know, there are ways to make your own granola with nuts and seeds and berries, lots of different coconut milk products that are out there and really wonderful. Putting avocado into your morning smoothie, who would have ever thought of that, right? Very helpful. Making a rice tortilla wrap with salmon, guacamole, or just an avocado, and or mustard. And sometimes, you know, just trying out a different breakfast like rice, cod, or salmon, and some greens. And I really do like the idea of lentil soup. I think it's something that you can add other vegetables to. Making a quinoa salad instead of a pasta salad. For dessert, having sauteed apples, and that's really good, especially with cinnamon. Rosemary roasted cauliflower and pine nuts. And, you know, that's pretty much it. When it comes to the holidays, too, in terms of gift-giving ideas, I think, you know, to stay healthy and to support people in maintaining healthy lifestyles, there are different ideas to think about, you know, things that would involve fitness, things like encouraging people by giving gym shoes or an exercise videotape, or making your own holiday food. And we talked in one of our webinars about a better butter, giving a healthy cookbook. So that really does summarize everything. I know we kind of whipped through the end of that, and I know you probably have questions now, but that really does conclude the bulk of the information that I had for you tonight.
Great, and I see Karen has a question if you want to unblock her line, and then Lenore had one earlier as well.
Okay, hi Karen.
Hi Deanna, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Oh good, okay. Okay, well tonight Mary Lou and I both happen to be kind of in a resistant mood because we just had Thanksgiving yesterday with family and stuff. And as we kind of get to a point where we're really doing a lot of these things, for example, when you were saying a fresh bowl of fruit is better than chocolate and candy, and we're both going, no, it isn't.
Wait, say that one more time. What is better than candy or the chocolate?
I'm going to take you off speaker. When you were saying a fresh bowl of fruit, when you're putting out food, when you're having company or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a fresh bowl of fruit is better than chocolate or candy, and we're both saying, no, it isn't.
Well, what about a combination of the two, Karen? You know, that's also something like the chocolate, You can have chocolate, but then what about having that together with fruit? You know, and having a nice platter. And actually, Harmony Hill does a nice job of that whenever they have dessert. Usually they have a fruit, and then they have some kind of other type of dessert.
Practically.
But yeah.
Yeah, actually the other day, and we were kind of wondering if that was a bad thing because it was a trigger, or if it was a good thing because it allowed us to have some of the things that we really want to have. I got some dark chocolate covered walnuts at the store, and it was really dark chocolate. It was a good, healthy, dark chocolate covered walnuts, and I added that to what I was eating, and it was really satisfying. I mean, overall, we're really both following almost everything you're saying, and then there's like, I just want to eat whatever I feel like, you know, and I don't care.
Sure.
Once in a while, once in a while. So right now is one of those times, I guess, today.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, I like the idea of an 80-20, that we don't have to be, you know, on the straight and narrow all the time. But if we can make as best we can the best choice for how we feel in that moment, and at least have the information about what's healthful, then we can figure out from decision to decision what would be appropriate. But I agree, you know, during the holidays and as food starts appearing at different gatherings, it's you know, we want to be open and social. And again, that's why exercising the day of a social event or having more vegetables that day might be one way to offset the need to partake.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Deanna, this is Mary Lou.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Mary Lou.
Yeah. We truly do follow just about everything you said. But I find that if we just don't bring it into the house, it's so much easier to follow. You know, like chocolate covered walnuts.
Yes.
I ate probably 4 of them right away because they were just so delicious. And I'm going, you know, I like the regular walnuts just fine.
Well, and you're absolutely right, Mary Lou. Basically, the studies show is that when food is within our sight, chances are we're going to eat that food. It takes enormous willpower, and you know, sometimes we just get bored, we get the munchies, and so it's a lot easier just to wander into the kitchen and see what we can eat. And so, again, if you can have some balancing foods or don't have the foods in the house, that is an excellent strategy just in and of itself. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Well, thank you for all that you've given us here on these webinars. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you both for being on these webinars.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, so we'll stay on and take a few more questions, but those who do have other plans and need to drop off, we just want to say thank you so much for attending this evening's session as well as the series overall. And when you log off, you will see a feedback survey, so let us know what you think, ideas for future sessions, and whether we should do them like this 4 in a row or spread them out more. We welcome your feedback. So I see Nonor's hand is still up. Deanna, do you want to take her question?
Sure. Nonor.
Hi, Deanna. You know, I have a lot of questions, but if you would like, I can just email them all to you since, you know, class is done. I don't want to keep you waiting, especially on a Sunday. I don't mind.
Why don't we take some of those questions?
Okay.
Because I'm sure that some other people might have similar questions, and as long as Elaine can stay and, you know, I
Absolutely.
can stay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay, well, I have a couple of questions regarding this session right now, so I can ask those. Regarding like the edamame and the soybeans, it's my understanding that a lot of soy products are genetically modified. That's one of my questions, and you know, how do we ensure that what we're eating isn't? And then also, what are your thoughts about soy and like hormone imbalance? Because I've read pros and cons regarding soy.
Yes. Okay, 2 excellent questions. Thank you. And we cover soy just about every cancer retreat that we do because it's always a hot topic. Soy is not the only GMO, genetically modified organism type of food. Corn and wheat are also commonly GMO foods. So to answer your first question, how do you know if you're getting GMO soy or not, even in the form of the fresh soybean? The only way that you will know for sure is whether or not the food is organic. By the definition of being organically grown, you cannot have a genetically modified organism involved. So you'd have to inquire of the restaurant that you're in, and if they say that they're not sure or it's not, then yes, the chances are greater that it would be GMO.
Okay.
To your second point, when it comes to, there are so many different phytoestrogens in our food supply. Phyto meaning plant, estrogens. You know, these are things that kind of act like estrogen or have some weak activity that's similar to estrogen. You know, soy gets a very bad reputation, but flaxseed is one of the bigger phytoestrogens and even more so than soy. So, you know, these are in our food supply. I mean, beans are phytoestrogens. And, you know, you have to take the advisement of your healthcare professional. Whatever your health condition is, you definitely need to go along with whatever they're saying because everybody is very unique. But it's an area of controversy. A lot of the functional medicine physicians would say, you know, it's mixed. It really depends on the patient. Is the patient premenopausal? Are they postmenopausal? Do they have estrogen in their body or do they not? What type of cancer, if any? In some cases, you know, if you look at some of the epidemiological or the population studies, you see that in Asia where there's a large consumption of soy food, now I'm not talking about soy supplements or isolated supplement products, but soy food consumption has been associated in large Asian population studies with lower occurrence and reoccurrence of breast cancer and some of the estrogen-sensitive cancers. I guess my concern is when people start doing too much of anything.
Right.
You know, and typically in the United States, we, you know, it's the silver bullet approach. We see one thing and we hear a good thing about it, and then before you know it, we're eating a lot of that food. And soy is in a lot of different processed foods. I believe it was the movie Food Inc., where they talked about how 80 to 90% of what's in your grocery store is either corn or soy-based. So, you know, that's a lot of texturized soy, isolated soy. It's not the whole food soy that has been fermented and used in culinary practices in Asia. So, you know, we're taking a food out of its context of where it was used and using it a little bit differently.
Right.
So it remains very controversial.
Okay. Okay. Would you like me to ask another question, or? Honestly,
oh, sure.
I have no issues.
With that?
Okay. Regarding, let me see, which one do I want to pick? You know what? I'll pick this one because it's something I'm researching right now. I'd like your feedback on water, and water that's alkaline, and do you see a value in it as far as that extra hydrogen and its like antioxidant capabilities?
Okay, so we definitely did touch the topic of water when we talked about detoxification.
Right.
And there are a lot of these different alkalizing waters, so to speak, where, you know, I don't know so much about this adding additional hydrogen because water, H2O, is a pretty saturated chemical compound, so I don't know what they're referring to when they talk about adding additional hydrogen, other than adding to water some alkalizing components, things like calcium carbonate or magnesium, which can make water more alkalizing. So is it helpful to drink this more alkalizing water, either it's made through a process or made by the addition of other substances? Well, it kind of depends. Are you going to be drinking that water all the time? Is it something that you'll bring in occasionally? What type of health conditions do you have? in general, there has been criticism about the American diet being too high in a lot of acidic foods, things like meat and other animal products. And so to get more alkalizing substances in the way of things like dark green leafy vegetables, as an example, would be good to offset some of that dietary acid. I have heard from some practitioners that there might be some concern about continually drinking very alkaline water because of the production of stomach acid, and that there might be some interference there. I have not seen any studies on that. I don't have any direct information about that. That's only an anecdotal report, and that was just in conversation at medical meetings, but nothing presented officially. So is it good to have more alkaline type substances? Well, it's good to have a balance of the acid as well as the alkaline. So if you feel like you're getting too much in the way of a lot of animal foods, it might be beneficial to have more alkalizing foods and or water to balance that.
Okay, and one last question. Where do you get your drinking water from? Because you said don't use bottled waters, but like I order Sparklets or Arrowhead and it comes in a bottle. Where do you get your drinking water?
Well, what I'm saying is if you can, as much as possible, if it comes down to you drinking water or not drinking water, it's better that you drink water. It's just like if you eat vegetables, if you have to grill them, it's better than not getting any vegetables at all, depending on the degree of grilling.
Right.
So you don't want to not drink water because the only thing accessible to you is some bottled water. What I was calling forth attention to in our second webinar on detoxification was talking about all these plasticizers that can leach into the water when the bottle is under temperature extremes, right? And so I see people that leave these bottles in their car, and then it might get hot in the summer or cold, and then we put the heat on. And so there's a lot of basically exchange of the substances with the water, that exchange of the substances in the bottle material itself.
Got it.
So my rule of thumb, in fact, I was just talking with a patient about this on Friday, is wherever you go, take your water. You know, you take your purse with you, so why wouldn't you take something like, you know, another necessity? So what you can do is, my preference is to take an inert stainless steel big thermos-like container, or even better and more cost efficient is to take a glass juice bottle, one of the larger ones that you might have collected and rinsed out, and then fill that up with, if you have a purified water source at home, and I like to toss into it sometimes a couple of cucumber slices or orange slices or lemon or lime slices or even a strawberry sliced. I make it like my own spa water, and then I can bring that with me throughout the day.
And that already makes it more alkaline, it sounds like.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And it gives us some taste because, you know, we kind of get bored just drinking water. So this adds a little bit of fruit essence to it, and essentially what you're doing is you're creating your own spa water. So it's a little bit fancy and tasty at the same time, and perhaps healthful.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Those are some great questions, Lenore. Thank you. And I don't see any other hands up, so any other questions before we say good night? And thank you again for attending. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the new year on more webinars.
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your participation.